I've been dying to try the Fujifilm X-H2S for a while, and I was finally able to get my hands on one. So this is going to be my first video, and hopefully a series of videos comparing the X-H2S against the Sony FX30. I know both of these cameras have been out for a while, so hopefully somebody's still interested, because I am. But in this first video, it's mostly going to be a paper specs comparison between the two cameras, capabilities, and not a ton of footage comparisons. Stay tuned for those in the future. Hopefully you can get something out of this video. Okay, let's get into it. I've come up with 9 categories that I'm going to be comparing these two cameras in. Image quality, external RAW, autofocus, audio, bodies, media, video and or filmmaking features, and finally lenses and overall ecosystem. So I'm going to be assigning a winner in each category and giving a point for the win. If the category is a draw, I'll give each camera a point. And in the end, I'll tally up the overall points and assign a winner. This is just for fun, just my non-scientific, non-objective ranking system of these two cameras, so don't get upset if your preferred camera doesn't come out on top. I've only had access to the X-H2S for a few days, so I still am definitely getting to grips with the camera. With that said, I am filming this video with both cameras. On the X-H2S, I have the Fujinon 16mm f1.4 WR lens, and on the FX30, I've got the Sony FE 20mm 1.8G lens. I'm filming with F-Log on the X-H2S and not F-Log 2 so that I could get the ISO and the exposure to match the FX30 more closely. The base ISO in F-Log is 640, I believe, but it's 1250 in F-Log 2. And unlike on Sony's cameras, you cannot go below the base ISO. So on the FX30, I'm shooting obviously in S-Log3, S-Gamma 3.Cine at ISO 800. I'm using continuous autofocus with eye tracking enabled on both cameras. So that's going to be a point of comparison in this video, which one has better autofocus. And I also have a basketball game going on in the background, so there is potential that the cameras can be tricked by people on the television. So just keep an eye on that as you watch this video. Let's start off with image quality. Both of these are a 6K sensor for video that is mostly downsampling into 4K. So on each camera, you're going to get a really crisp and detailed 4K image. But the X-H2S also allows you to shoot in 6.2K in the 3:2 full aspect ratio of the sensor. Whereas on the FX30, you don't have any ability to shoot in a higher resolution than 4K. Both of them have H.264 and H.265 long GOP recording options, and both have all-eye internally as well. FX30 is an H.264 all-eye, whereas the X-H2S has H.264 and H.265 all-eye options, as well as ProRes internally. There are so many bitrate, data rate options on the X-H2S, probably way too many. So I think the potential for it to be very confusing for people is definitely there. But if you like having a lot of options, well, you got them in the X-H2S. Both cameras shoot in 16:9, so in 4K that's 3840 by 2160. Both cameras also have 4K DCI mode, so that's 4096 by 2160. On the FX30, in order to use the DCI modes, you do have to shoot in the All-I or X80C SI codec, but you can shoot DCI in pretty much any codec and bitrate that you want to on the X-H2S. Both have lots of 1080p options. In my experience, the FX30 1080p isn't that good, and I kind of think it's the same situation on the X-H2S, but not 100% sure. They both can shoot up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. Both can shoot 4K 120, however, it's slightly different. On the FX30, it crops into exactly 3840 by 2160 pixels, so you don't get a 6K oversampled into 4K 120. So you're getting about a 1.5 times crop into the sensor. X-H2S also crops into the sensor, but not as much, and you still get a little bit of an oversample, I think from around 4.7 or 4.8K. To do 4K 120, you do have to go into an overcrank mode on the X-H2S, which means that the file will be slowed down to a base frame rate of 24/30, and you do not get audio in the 4K 120. The FX30 has the S&Q, or slow and quick, so it's going to bake in the slow motion in your base frame rate of 24, 30, or 60, and you don't get audio, but you can shoot in a base frame rate of 120 frames per second, and you'll get audio recording in that mode with the FX30. Another differentiating factor between these two cameras is noise performance and noise reduction. You don't have any control over the noise reduction settings in the FX30, so it's going to have noise reduction applied to varying degrees, and as you increase the ISO, you're going to get more noise reduction typically. There are noise reduction settings in the X-H2S, something called high ISO noise reduction and an all-eye noise reduction. I'm somebody who prefers having more control, so I really appreciate the ability to change the noise reduction in camera on the X-H2S, and I think potentially you can get better results if you're willing to do some noise reduction in post-production. There's also really different characteristics of the noise. These have two different types of sensors. That's something that's always been interesting about Fujifilm to me and to a lot of people, is that they do development of their own sensors, and theirs is called the X-Trans sensor, and it's different from the regular Bayer sensor that Sony and just about every other camera uses. So it definitely has a different noise characteristic and kind of even a different imaging characteristic to it. So it looks to me like the noise on the X-H2S is more of a luma noise, whereas the noise on the FX30 is both luma and chroma noise. Well, I'll show you, and you can sort of make up your minds how you think they look. Even though I'm shooting an F-Log, there is the F-Log2 profile in the X-H2S. And this is pretty interesting because if you're shooting an F-Log2 at 24 or 30 frames per second, it's actually sampling 14 bits of color information, compressing that down into the 10-bit 422. Whereas most cameras, and the FX30 included, are only sampling from 12 bits when they're shooting video. You have more color information to start with in F-Log2 at 24 and 30 frames per second. But when you go up to 60, it comes down to 12-bit, and definitely something weird going on with 4K 120 in F-Log2. That's going to take some further investigation on my part. So there's definitely some limitations and some compromises with this camera when you are looking at F-Log2 versus the other picture profiles that are available. It also affects rolling shutter, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Taking all of that, I think the overall win in image quality goes to the X-H2S because you have more options, you have potential for higher quality files, you also have 6.2K open gate. Next is external RAW. FX30 is limited to ProRes RAW, so you're going to need an Atomos recorder. You're obviously limited to using that in Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro natively. You actually get fewer RAW controls in Premiere Pro than you do in Final Cut Pro. You don't have any native support for that ProRes RAW in DaVinci Resolve, so you're going to have to convert that into Cinema DNG if you want RAW controls. So that's another expense and another workflow thing you're going to have to do to convert those files. The X-H2S supports ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW if you use a Blackmagic Video Assist. FX30 has a 4.7K raw output, and what that means is it doesn't oversample from 6K, it actually crops into the 4.7K portion of the sensor. I've got a video about the ProRes RAW features on the FX30, so if you want to see what that looks like, then check out the video that's linked above. It shoots up to 60 frames per second, but as far as I know, there's no true 24p with the external RAW support. The X-H2S outputs a 4.8K signal, and I wasn't able to find if that is an oversample, so you get the full readout, or if it's cropped into 4.8K. Being raw video, I would suspect that it is a crop, but I'm not 100% sure. So if anybody knows, please tell us in the comments. The X-H2S also can output the 6.2K 3x2 open gate in RAW up to 30 frames per second. It also does support true 24 and 25p frame rates. The RAW capabilities win goes to the X-H2S. I probably could have lumped this into the image quality because I think rolling shutter is a part of the image quality, but there's some interesting things going on with the rolling shutter, as I alluded to with the F-Log2, so I thought it was worth putting it in its own category. Raw numbers wise, the win goes to the X-H2S. It is a stacked sensor and it has an insanely fast readout. Sorry, FX30. Don't worry, you're going to get some wins, so don't get discouraged. In F-Log2, the readout is slower than it is in F-Log and all the other picture profile options in the camera. Even that slower F-Log2 readout is faster than the readout in the FX30. But you have some decisions to make with the F-Log2 because you have the higher ISO of 1250, the slower rolling shutter, and the difference in the downsample once you get up to 60 frames per second, and then also It looked really weird when I did 4K 120. Again, I'm gonna need to do some more investigation on that. Rolling shutter, X-H2S. Haven't had much chance to test out the autofocus on the X-H2S. I did film an entire video with it and it was super solid. Didn't see any hunting or any weirdness. It seemed pretty locked on to my eye, just like I've always experienced with the FX30. Both cameras have a lot of the same tracking, eye tracking and object tracking options. So it's got human and non-human eye tracking in video. It also has object tracking like planes, trains, and automobiles. Where the FX30 has a significant advantage is with touch tracking. With the FX30, you can touch on the back of the LCD and it will put a little box and track the thing that you touched. This is a really magical feature and it's extremely helpful in a lot of different situations. A couple scenarios where this is helpful is like the one that I'm currently filming, where I've got obviously me in frame and then other people. So which person is the camera gonna focus on? Hopefully me, but I can't say for sure which one it's gonna choose. But even if you had like 2 or 3 people who were potentially subjects in your image, with the Sony, you can just put the box on the one that you want to maintain focus on. You obviously cannot do that with the X-H2S. So even though I've got a lot of testing to do with the autofocus on the X-H2S, I think just by virtue of having that touch tracking feature, the win goes to the FX30. So this one is pretty interesting because the FX30 has 2 different body options, one with the XLR top handle, which I'm using to record the audio in this video. You can also get it without. The XLR audio top handle is really great because it gives you 2 XLR inputs and a second 3.5mm mic input. So you can have a total of 4 tracks going into the FX30 at once. You have 16-bit or 24-bit recording with that XLR module, and I think it tops out at 48 kilohertz. You've got a mic input, mic plus 48 volts phantom power, and line inputs with the XLR audio top handle. There is no line input directly into the camera body, whereas the X-H2S does have a line input. The X-H2S also allows you to record at 2 different gain levels, so you can essentially set like a safety level so that you make sure you don't clip your audio. If you don't get the XLR audio top handle with the FX30, you could always buy the Sony K3M adapter, which is basically the audio top handle without the handle portion, which gives you the same inputs and recording capabilities. Fujifilm does not make its own audio adapter, but Tascam does make an adapter that works natively with Fujifilm cameras. So it slots right into that hot shoe, and that way you can record 2 XLR channels into the camera without any cable. That XLR module can record 16 and 24-bit audio up to 96 kilohertz. Sony makes a lot of other microphones that are compatible with that MI shoe. So you have on-camera shotgun mics and various wireless lavalier systems that will plug right into that hot shoe that you can use with Sony cameras. So I'm gonna call this one a draw because internally the X-H2S has some additional features, but I think overall, if you take into account all of the different accessories and microphone options that you have with the Sony system, well, yeah, we'll call it a draw. The X-H2S is obviously a classic hybrid camera, which essentially means it's a photo camera that happens to have really amazing video capabilities, whereas the FX30 is much more of a dedicated video camera. In a way, it's kind of more of a hybrid camera than the X-H2S. The FX30 and the FX3 obviously started life as a Sony alpha camera and then had some significant cosmetic surgery, so to speak. So the EVF obviously was lopped off in addition to the top dials. The on-off switch is moved to a switch in the back, and then this was repurposed as a zoom rocker. A lot of the other buttons on the back are essentially the same, some maybe repositioned a little bit, and they all get labeled with dedicated video functions. But the overall form factor is very much the same as any other alpha mirrorless camera. It can also take photographs, but it's much more limited as a photo camera by virtue of losing a lot of those photo features. But otherwise, both cameras have really great build quality. They both feel really nice in the hand. The buttons and dials and overall materials all feel really good. This category really comes down to personal preference, I think. Based on anecdotal data, I think that the majority of video shooters don't care about EVFs, so the fact that the FX30 doesn't have one doesn't really matter and maybe is a benefit in terms of its overall size and maybe gimbal readiness. If you do like an EVF, well, you've got it on the X-H2S, and it is a really excellent EVF. Being a really high-end photo camera, the X-H2S is very extensively weather sealed. The FX30 has a fan and vents, so it's obviously not as sealed. Both have similar I/O and pretty good port doors that stay out of the way for the most part. Both have USB Type-C that transmit data and also have power delivery, so you can plug them in to extend the battery life quite a bit. Both also have full-size HDMI, 3.5-inch mic input, and headphone output. I did mention the zoom rocker on the FX30, so if you've got power zoom lenses, you can control the zoom with that rocker, which is a really cool feature. You can also set that to control clear image zoom. The FX30 has a bunch of tally lights on the top front, on the top record button. There's one on the back of the camera. You can also put a red rectangle around the LCD screen. So you're definitely going to know you're recording on the FX30. The X-H2S has the little focus flashlight thing, which can double as a tally light. You can set that to use as a tally light. It's not red, it's just a white light. So overall, let's call bodies, ergonomics, physical features a draw. It's really going to come down to your preference. Both are really good. So both of these cameras have dual card slots and can do relay recording or dual or backup recording. The FX30 technically has 4 card slots, although you can't put 4 cards in at the same time. You can have dual SD cards or dual CF Express Type A cards, or you can have one SD and one CF Express Type A card. So you have a lot of flexibility. You can mix and match cards in different ways and have relay and redundant recording. The X-H2S has one SD card slot and one CF Express Type B card slot. So if you're doing backup recording or simultaneous recording, the quality of your recording or the options are going to be limited to the SD card, essentially. I do think that the CF Express Type B card is a better format than CF Express Type A because more cameras use it, so there's more options out there, and by and large, they're cheaper than comparable CF Express Type A cards. Again, we're going to call this one a draw. You've got more options with the FX30, but you've got better high quality options with the X-H2S. I'm probably going to leave some out, so whatever those are, let me know in the comments, but I'm going to do my best. The FX30 has user LUT support, so you can upload your own LUTs to the camera. You can use those to monitor your shot on the LCD screen. You can send those LUTs over HDMI to another monitor or to a live streaming switcher. You can bake the LUT into the file if you want to. The X-H2S does not have any LUT support. In F-Log and F-Log2, you can use basically Gamma Display Assist to monitor a Rec. 709 on the LCD and the EVF, but you cannot send that over HDMI. Both cameras have some timecode features and timecode support, but I'm not super well versed on either of the timecodes on these cameras. Neither camera, as of the time of recording this, has shutter angle. That's supposed to be coming to the FX30 later in the year. Both of them do have really flexible shutter speed options, so you can set your shutter speed to 1/48 if you're recording in 24 frames per second, and 1/120th if you're in 60, as opposed to most photo cameras, which will have 1/50th and 1/125th. Both of them have like variable shutter speed options so that you can dial in the shutter speed in very fine increments to try to eliminate any flickering, banding issues that you might have with lights. The FX30 has Cine EI, and I know there's a lot of confusion about what that means, but Cine EI really is an exposure tool. It doesn't change the quality of the recording. If you were to shoot in flexible ISO and then you shot the same clip in Cine EI, as long as your exposures were the same, you're going to get the same results. So if you count it as an exposure tool, that gives you Cine EI, zebras. You've got 2 custom zebras that you can toggle between on the camera, and histogram. So 3 different exposure tools on the FX30. The X-H2S really only has 1 zebra level that you can set and a histogram. The FX30 has the zoom rocker, which I already mentioned, and the internal fan. So really not going to find yourself in very many situations where you have to worry about overheating with the FX30. The X-H2S has the potential of overheating, more scenarios definitely than the FX30. Fujifilm does make a fan that you can bolt onto the back of the camera, but if you have that, you can't close the LCD, so it's definitely not as elegant a solution as the internal fan of the FX30. I'm not going to throw in the image quality stuff that we've already talked about, although technically I guess it would be video and filmmaking features, but I think it would definitely tilt things in favor of the X-H2S. So without that, I think the video and filmmaking features category is going to go to the FX30. Being mirrorless cameras, both of these are very adaptable. You can basically take all of the legacy lens mounts prior to mirrorless cameras and adapt them to either camera. So Canon EF, Canon FD, Nikon F, PL lenses, the list goes on. You can use speed boosters on both cameras to increase the light gathering capabilities and also boost the field of view. Both of them are also open to third-party manufacturers, and in fact you'll find a lot of the same lenses available on both from Sigma, Tamron, and Viltrox. In terms of first-party lenses, they're both really well supported. For APS-C lenses, Fuji is maybe a little bit better supported than the Sony E-mount, but Sony has an advantage too because their E-mount is compatible with both their APS-C and full-frame cameras. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm filming on the Sony FE 20mm f1.8G lens, which is a full-frame lens. So you don't have any sort of penalty using full frame on the FX30 in terms of its autofocusing capabilities. The aperture is fully controllable by the camera body, etc. Fujifilm does not make another camera body system that's compatible with the X mount. I mentioned like audio devices that Sony manufactures, microphones, etc. that are compatible with the MI shoe on their camera. So I think that in terms of lenses and overall ecosystem, Sony probably gets the win here too. After tabulating the results, turns out we have a draw. I did not intend for that to happen. I definitely would have picked a winner. And actually, this is the third time I've recorded this video. And in the previous two recordings, the X-H2S came out on top. But I think it was kind of cheating on that video and filmmaking features category. Turns out both of these are excellent cameras and you obviously cannot go wrong with either one. I'd love to know what you think and whatever else I probably left out of this video. There's definitely a lot to cover and this is probably pretty long as it stands, so I don't feel too bad about leaving anything out. But if there was something major that you think we should know about, let us know about it. All right, cool. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you got something out of that, and stay tuned for more coverage of the X-H2S and the FX30.